That's hugely helpful, and it ties on to something that Anna just put in the talk, which is the chat, which is I'm sure you're going to provide resources for this, but what recommendations do you have for starting conversations about race with adults and continuing to have our open, honest conversations with our peers? And one thing I would add on to that is I think obviously we have a lot of diversity on this call, even so people who are maybe allies and aren't a person of color themselves, but they want to bring it up and they may feel hesitant. How do I bring it up? How do I address it? And I think you got at that a little bit with language in the beginning, but if you can address kind of that whole arc of it, it would be helpful.
Yes, and so I do have some additional. I don't want to run through the resources. I like to kind of keep them on the screen in case folks want to like jot things down.
Perfect.
And you all have access to this, so if you want to share like these specific slides or anything, feel free. So that if anyone sees anything that they want to buy or get for their own families, I would love that. But I think to that point, I think one of the things, especially in the beginning, Liz, thanks for calling that out, right, is that safety piece of it, but also knowing that it's going to be uncomfortable in some spaces. It's probably harder sometimes to have certain conversations with adults. I don't want to say it's easier. I chose youth work for a reason. Like, love kiddos. I'm getting into this now, and I'm like older. I'm like, oh, I'm working with adults more, and it's sometimes when we're older, especially like going into the school, I work with some, educators that have been educating for 30, 40 years. And they're just like, I was told like, this is the sensitive generation. You all are too sensitive. And I'm like, oh, right. Like you hear
Yeah,
those
exactly.
things and folks have these ideologies or thoughts or just ways of life, right? That's how they lived for the last, however many years of their life. So I think a part of it is just like making sure that you have your own support, right? Like you have a support system for yourself. And as you go in, as you, suggest conversations, whether they're with family, whether they're in the workplace, is just be open and honest about what it means to you. But be ready to feel a little uncomfortable. And that's why I think in the beginning I put embrace it, embrace like being uncomfortable. I think Will Smith said something, he has like a video out recently and it was like talking about fear. And it was like, do it afraid. Like if we let fear will cripple us if we let it stop what it is we want to do in life. And so many times we just learn to just, okay, do it afraid. They don't like the suggestion or they're pushing against it. Okay, let me go back to my support system. Let me go back to some of these resources. Some of the books that I shared, I don't know if I have them in the slide because these are more youth led. I do, as I go through the slides, they get older. So as you see, like the first slide was kind of like more children's, young, elementary school. And then The Hate You Give, The House on Mango Street, Dear Black Boy, It's Okay to Cry. Trevor Noah, Born a Crime, I would say are more for high school age students. What Lane as well, Intersection Ally. So a lot of those I would suggest for more older students. And then these are some films that I suggest that I've watched with children that I've shared as resources. And I think too, when we talk about like that adult piece, I think it's all about suggestion, knowing that like you can't change everyone, but you can influence. And so maybe it's just starting by saying, hey, I watched this really cool documentary on Netflix called 13. And I really think it would be cool if we suggested this to all of the folks in our department. Or I really think it would be cool if our family, right, got together and talked about it. I know a board member from my organization, or she's no longer, she retired, but she reached out to me recently about how when all of this happened, she like just started like a mini like educational space for her family. She's like, you know what? We're going to read this book. White Fragility was the book that they chose. We're going to bring someone in to train and educate us on this topic. And now she's kind of taking the work out into her community and she's looking to partner. And so she reached out to me. And one of the things she said, and a lot of times what I hear is like, you know what? I'm not the one to have this conversation with folks. So can you help me? Can you be there as a support? I think that's totally fine to have that when you're an adult in spaces where you just don't feel comfortable. Is to really enhance that, enhance your knowledge base so you know what you're talking about when you're going to them, but then also what you don't feel comfortable with, just having a proper support system that can pour into you. I think Kunik is a great idea, is a great space for that, where you have the support, where you might be like, I'm an ally, I'm really passionate about this. I want to bring this to my job. what are the resources to help me do it in a safe way for me, right? Sometimes we fear our jobs on the right. Like there are lots of different things that can create that uncomfortability. And so I think that's a part of it, is that true support. Once again, more movies, more TV shows. Motown Magic, that's Daxon's favorite. I've literally been watching that show since he was 2 months old. And it's literally every Motown song put into these little 15-minute episodes about Ben and his friends and family. And so it's like the coolest thing ever to see my son dance around to Motown songs. But other movies, sure, some of you have heard of or seen that are cool. Inside Out is more of a movie that I think is about, I like to say it's about emotions, mental health, those kind of things, but definitely still teaching our children about very courageous topics. Oh, this is just something I'm sharing because I think it's really cute. When we talked about getting active piece, right? Involving our kids as much as possible in things. And then here are some websites, and I can once again, Jess and Liz, kind of just copy and paste this link if you want to share it out with folks. But these are some really good websites that I think can help in multiple spaces, in workspaces, parenting, that are just resources on top of resources, trainings, videos, books, all of those things. These are a few of the resources that I've used and that I love to share. So I think if anyone is having any, struggles having conversations, suggesting things at work, these are some of the resources I definitely suggest that you start with. Because even if it's a matter of suggesting a training or a coaching session or workshop, and once again, reminding the leadership, reminding your family that it's just about making ourselves better and making ourselves aware. It's like the awareness piece, I think, also is very, very prominent.